Moral choices have become a dime a dozen in modern video games, but it is still rare when a game throws you one that is genuinely tough to consider. I mean, Fallout 3's iconic "should I nuke this town or not nuke this town" choice is incredible, don't get me wrong, but it's not much of a moral quandary, is it? The following, however, are much tougher to gauge. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 8 hardest moral choices in recent video games. Number 8, Ivar's death, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. One of the characters who is constantly at odds with protagonist Eivor in Assassin's Creed Valhalla is Ivar, an absolute nightmare of a man who constantly threatens to destabilize the progress you've made throughout England. The issue is, he's actually the brother of some solid allies that you've acquired, and you don't really want to piss them off by getting into a big thing with him. Ultimately, further on through the story, Ivar does show his true colours, and you have no choice but to battle him to the death. But that's not the moral choice in question here, but rather what comes after. See, after you beat him, Ivar requests that you hand him his axe before he dies, in order for him to reach Valhalla in the afterlife. The question becomes then, does this guy even deserve it? He's a piece of trash. Does he deserve this kindness? And if he doesn't, will the disgrace eventually make its way to his relatives who will punish you because of it? The latter question is again brought up when his brother Uber asks you directly whether he died well or badly. This raises another choice. Do you lie and say that he did die well, hoping that his brother never finds out and then hates you for it? Or do you admit that you denied him a warrior's death, leading to the question of, will he appreciate the honesty, or will he, once again, hate you for it? There are a lot of outcomes, and none of them seem all that good. Number 7, which hostage to save as Dusk Falls. As Dusk Falls is an absolutely brilliant narrative-driven game from this year, spinning the tale of a fractured family who are taken as hostages by a gang of outlaws being pursued by the police. Things are much more complicated than that though, and the genius of the game is that the moral choices that you're given don't really adhere to what I'm going to call video game logic. You might think that there's more to these criminals than first meets the eye, and that they'll be trustworthy by the end, so try to game the choices early on. But it's rarely ever that black and white. Good people make bad decisions after all, and it's up to you to navigate and really consider the possible consequences of every situation in the game. However, the hardest moral choice comes quite early on, when you're given the chance to choose a hostage to set free. You can only pick one, so the question, depending on certain circumstances, is, do you save your young innocent daughter, do you save your injured father with brain cancer, or do you get your potentially shot wife out of the situation? But the issue is, you don't really know what you're sending them out to. Would they be safer with you than with the police? Are you dooming whoever stays? How could you possibly deem who is more worthy to be saved? It's a tough decision, and again, one with no real right answer. Number 6, who should starve? The Outer Worlds. The Outer Worlds is Obsidian Entertainment's spiritual successor to the much-beloved Fallout New Vegas. And like New Vegas, Outer Worlds is full of competing factions whose politics you'll need to navigate over the course of the game, deciding who wins, who loses, and a spectrum of variables in between. The game doesn't waste any time though, and so it hits you with one of the toughest faction choices just a few hours in. In need of a power source for your ship, you'll come to Edgewater, a company town where everyone works at the local cannery for meager compensation, led by corporate stooge Reed. In frustration, the town botanist Adelaide led half of its people to start their own community, leaving Edgewater malnourished and the cannery undermanned and in disrepair. Either faction will help you if you divert power from one community or the other, forcing a sort of reconciliation, but there is a lot to consider. For one, Adelaide's faction is self-sufficient and happier, but it comes at a cost. The people of Edgewater may labour for low wages, but they also rely on those wages to provide for their families, both in Edgewater and off-world. So you're essentially forcing a way of life on everyone, and hopefully you can live with your choice. Number 5, to feed or not to feed. Vampire. Don't Nod's Vampire is a game full of moral choices, usually made at the end of each of the game's chapters. These choices determine whether or not the plague continues to spread through London. However, arguably its biggest moral choice is pervasive all the way throughout the game. That being, do you give in to your vampiric urges and feed on the blood of the living, or do you hold onto your humanity and resist? Now this is kind of a difficult question, because yes, you can subsist on rats in the game, which is enough to keep yourself alive, but the only way to truly gain power is to feed on your fellow humans. Moreover, through your interactions, you can nourish people to make their blood more potent, raising them for the slaughter like livestock. So maybe you see feeding on the ill as a mercy or on the wicked as justice, but you won't have too much to gain without helping them. Of course, there is also the greater good to consider as well, and as the game grows in difficulty, the urge to feed becomes harder and harder to resist. If a boss has killed you 10 times already, well, what's one less person in this digital world? Number 4, Pacifism or War, Detroit Become Human. Developer Quantic Dream's Detroit Become Human is arguably the most conceptually successful of their line of narrative games built around player choice. Themes of AI versus human conflict, robot servitude, free will, and more aren't exactly new, but Detroit treads them pretty well, casting the character in alternating roles as 3 different androids whose actions change the world around them. One of these characters is Marcus, a reluctant leader of the movement for android independence. Trusted with this authority, you're frequently forced to make difficult decisions and sacrifices, and one you'll repeatedly come up against is a choice between peaceful or violent forms of protest. And the game does a pretty good job of making choices difficult. If you decide early on to pursue pacifism, you're constantly tested at every turn. For instance, do you spare the police who shoot a peaceful android in a panic, and as your people are gunned down one by one during your march, do you fight back? Your people will be killed either way, so the question is it better to die fighting for change, rather than try to make a pacifistic point? Number 3, give Johnny your body, Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 might not have been the complex RPG experience many wanted, but it still provided a handful of genuinely difficult moral choices. One of these comes right at the very end, where you're given the option to live out the remainder of your life, said to be about 6 months if you don't find a miracle cure for the virus killing you, or give your body to Johnny Silverhand, whose consciousness has been implanted in your head and will be granted a second life in your body, essentially wiping your own consciousness from existence. Now, this is harder than it seems. Johnny has already lived a life previously, and if you've completed all of his side quests, did kinda tie up the loose ends that he had in this world. Also, it's not even really his world anymore, as he's been displaced in time and now in body, so what does he even have to live for? Your character V, on the other hand, might only have 6 months, but this is their body after all, and who's to say a cure won't be found in that time? Even if it's not, it's 6 months spent potentially with the people that they love, and that's nothing to sniff at. So, whatever ending you choose, you'll probably have a lingering thought nagging at you asking whether you did the right thing. Number 2, How to End the World, Banner Saga 3. Unlike similar games, Stoic's Banner Saga trilogy actually delivered on the promise that your choices would matter by the end. Your emotions are relentlessly tested, but arguably no more so than in the game's finale. See, you eventually learn that Eyvind, a main party member for all 3 games, doomed the world. By using dark powers to resurrect his murdered love Juno, also a main party member, he unleashed the giant worm that now spreads death wherever it goes. He must now seal Juno away to contain this threat and hold it at bay for eternity. So, she has to make the ultimate sacrifice for his actions, all to save a world already in ruin. Or you can make a deal with the devil, granting the worm dominion over half of the world in exchange for Juno remaining free, to again live a life of remorse, severed from the cycle of life and death. So, whatever your choice, was it worth it? To save a dead world, or to betray half of it to the most evil force in the cosmos? To make a dear friend pay for a crime she didn't commit, or let her be free to live an ultimately meaningless life? Dig deep and choose wisely. Number 1, Spare or Kill Lord Shimura, Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima isn't really a game packed with moral choices, but it does hit you with an absolute whopper right at the end. Having lost his father as a boy, protagonist Jin was raised mostly by his uncle, Shimura. Shimura taught Jin everything that he knows about the way of the samurai, with an emphasis on how to conduct himself honorably as a warrior and show respect to his enemies. Faced with overwhelming odds though, and the samurai more or less gone, Jin adopts the underhanded tactics of the ninja in his battle against the invaders. This puts him at odds with his uncle though, who insists dying honorably would be preferable to what he deems as terrorism. By the end, the two arrive at an irreconcilable divide, resulting in a duel. Upon winning, naturally, do you kill or spare your surrogate father? Shimura requests a warrior's death, and it would allow him to keep his honor and die believing that Jin still possessed some of his values that he had instilled. However, ultimately though, this guy is still your uncle. He's the reason you're here and were able to fight the invaders at all, and if spared, he'll live in shame and disown you, yes, but he'll live nonetheless, and maybe in a sequel games, the two might be able to make amends. With this in mind, it's a tough choice with no right answer. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What did you choose when you came up against these moral choices? And are there any other difficult ones from recent games that I missed off here? While you're down there as well, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.